The man who heard the truth first yet almost missed it forever. The first person to grasp the Buddha's teaching wasn't the wisest, the most devoted, or the most spiritually gifted. He was a man who had already given up. Venerable Kauṇḍinya holds the extraordinary distinction of being the very first human being to achieve enlightenment after hearing the Buddha speak. Yet his path to that moment was paved with doubt, abandonment, and the crushing weight of broken promises. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not to those who never faltered, but to those who faltered completely and found the courage to listen one more time. Before we dive into this profound story, I invite you to subscribe to Buddhist Stories. Here, we don't just tell tales, we uncover the timeless wisdom hidden within each disciple's journey, showing you the path to awakening that remains as relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago. Join our community of seekers walking this ancient path together. The prophecy and the promise. In the Sakya kingdom, when Prince Siddhartha was born, 8 Brahmin scholars were summoned to read the infant's future. These weren't ordinary fortune tellers, they were the most learned men in the land, masters of the Vedas, interpreters of cosmic signs. 7 of them raised 2 fingers, indicating 2 possible paths. The child would become either a great universal monarch or a fully enlightened Buddha. But one Brahmin raised only 1 finger. His name was Kaundinya, and he was the youngest among them, barely established in his career as a spiritual advisor. While his senior colleagues hedged their predictions, Kaundinya spoke with absolute certainty. This child will renounce the world. This child will become a Buddha. There is no other possibility. King Suddhodana heard these words with a father's dread. Everything he did afterward, the 3 palaces, the sensual pleasures, the sheltering from suffering, was an attempt to prove young Kaundinya wrong. But Kaundinya himself never forgot his own prophecy. He carried it like a seed in his heart, waiting for the season of its flowering. Years passed. Kaundinya grew older. His reputation as a scholar solidified. He married, had children, performed rituals for noble families. Life became comfortable, predictable. The young prince he had prophesied about became a distant memory, a story he might tell at gatherings. I once predicted a Buddha would arise. Then one day, news spread like wildfire through the kingdom. Prince Siddhartha had abandoned his palace, his wife, his infant son. He had shaved his head and walked into the forest seeking answers to suffering. Kaundinya heard this, and something ancient stirred within him. The prophecy, his prophecy. It was unfolding exactly as he had foreseen. And in that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of human spiritual history. He would find the prince and serve him on his quest, but he would not go alone. 4 other young men joined him, sons of the other Brahmins who had made that original prediction. Their names were Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahanama, and Asaji. Together, these 5 men renounced their comfortable lives and set out to find the wandering prince who might become a Buddha. 6 years in the wilderness, they found Siddhartha in the forest near Uruvela, engaged in the most extreme ascetic practices imaginable. He was experimenting with self-mortification, pushing his body to the brink of death in search of spiritual liberation. And the 5 men led by Kaundinya became his attendants, his supporters, his fellow seekers. For 6 years they practiced together. 6 years of eating single grains of rice, 6 years of holding their breath until unconsciousness, 6 years of sleeping on beds of thorns, standing in scorching sun, sitting in freezing water. Siddhartha's ribs became visible like the beams of an old house. His eyes sank deep into their sockets. His skin turned dark and leathery. And Kaundinya watched all of this with unwavering faith. This was the future Buddha. Whatever he did must be the path. If extreme asceticism was the way, then Kaundinya would follow him through every painful moment of it. The bond between them grew profound. Kaundinya wasn't just an attendant, he was the eldest, the leader of the group, the one who had seen Siddhartha as an infant and prophesied his destiny. There was almost a parental quality to his devotion, mixed with the deepest spiritual respect. But then came the day that shattered everything. Siddhartha, skeletal and weak, accepted a bowl of milk rice from a village woman named Sujata. He ate it. He ate substantial food. He bathed in the river. He began to restore his strength. The 5 ascetics watched in horror and disbelief. Their leader, the future Buddha, was abandoning the path. After 6 years of perfect discipline, he was giving up, falling back into indulgence and comfort. The very thing that made him special, his superhuman endurance, was crumbling before their eyes. Kaundinya faced an impossible choice. This was the man he had prophesied would become a Buddha. This was the man he had abandoned his family to follow. But this was also a man who appeared to be failing, who seemed to have lost his way. The 5 men conferred among themselves. The conclusion was unanimous. Siddhartha had given up the struggle. He was no longer worthy of their service. They would leave him and continue the ascetic practices on their own. And so they left. They walked away from the man who would become the Buddha just weeks before his enlightenment. If you're finding value in this journey through Buddhist history, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. These stories aren't just ancient history, they're maps for your own spiritual journey. The abandonment and the awakening imagine Kaundinya's state of mind during that walk away from Siddhartha. He had staked everything on a prophecy he made as a young man. He had given up decades of his life. Now in his later years, he was walking away from what appeared to be a failed experiment. The doubt must have been crushing. Had he been wrong all along? Had he wasted his life following a delusion? Was the prophecy just the arrogant certainty of youth, not divine insight? The 5 men traveled to Isipatana, the deer park near Varanasi, and resumed their harsh practices. But something had changed. The heart had gone out of it. They were practicing now not with hope, but with stubbornness. Not with faith, but with pride. We will prove we were right. We will achieve enlightenment through asceticism, even if Siddhartha could not. Weeks passed. Then one day, as they sat in meditation, they saw a figure approaching in the distance. As he came closer, they recognized him. Siddhartha. But he looked different. He wasn't emaciated anymore. His skin glowed with health. His posture radiated something they had never seen before. A profound peace, a completion, an arrival. The 5 ascetics made a pact among themselves. We will not show him respect. We will not bow to him. We will treat him as an equal at best, perhaps even as a failure who has returned seeking our company. We must protect our pride. Siddhartha, now the Buddha, the awakened one, walked steadily toward them. And as he approached, something extraordinary happened. One by one, despite their pact, despite their intentions, the 5 men found themselves unable to maintain their cold demeanor. Some stood to greet him. Others fetched water and a seat. Their hands moved almost involuntarily to prepare a place for him. But they still addressed him by his personal name, Gautama, refusing to use honorific titles. They still spoke to him as an equal who had abandoned the true path. Then the Buddha spoke. He told them not to address him familiarly, for he had achieved what they all sought. He had become a Tathagata, a fully awakened one. He had discovered the middle way between indulgence and self-mortification, and it had led him to complete liberation. Kaundinya response was skeptical, almost bitter. If you could not achieve awakening through those extreme practices, how could you achieve it by giving them up? We who knew you then do not believe you have found enlightenment now through a path of ease. Here was the man who had once prophesied a Buddha, now refusing to recognize the Buddha sitting before him. Here was the first believer becoming the greatest skeptic. The irony was profound, almost tragic. But the Buddha did not argue. He simply asked, "Have you ever known me to lie? Have you ever known me to make false claims?" Kaundinya had to admit, "No, never." "Then listen," the Buddha said, and he began to teach. The first turning of the wheel. What happened next is called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion of the wheel of truth. It was the Buddha's first teaching, delivered to these 5 skeptical ascetics in the deer park at Isipatana. He spoke of the middle way, the path between extremism and indulgence. He taught the 4 noble truths: that suffering exists, that suffering has a cause, that suffering can end, and that there is a path to the end of suffering. He explained the Noble Eightfold Path: right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. The 5 men listened, but they listened differently. Buddha heard philosophy, Vappa heard concepts, Mahanama and Asaji heard inspiring words. But Kaundinya heard reality itself speaking. There's a moment in deep learning when everything clicks, when the abstract becomes concrete, when words stop being words and become direct experience. Kaundinya reached that moment during the Buddha's first discourse. The Pali texts record the exact moment. As the Buddha explained the truth of suffering and its cessation, the dustless, stainless vision of truth arose in Venerable Kauṇḍinya. Whatever has the nature of arising, all that has the nature of ceasing. This simple formula, everything that arises must pass away, wasn't just an intellectual insight for Kaundinya. It was a direct perception of reality. He saw the arising and passing of all phenomena. He saw that nothing is permanent, nothing is self, and therefore nothing can provide ultimate satisfaction. And in seeing this completely, the first knot of his attachments loosened and fell away. He became a sotapanna, a stream enterer, the first stage of enlightenment, and he became the very first person in history to achieve this breakthrough after hearing the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha, recognizing what had happened, exclaimed with joy, "Kaundinya knows. Kaundinya understands." And from that moment, Kaundinya was known as Añña Kauṇḍinya, Kaundinya who knows. Think about the poetry of this moment. The man who had prophesied the Buddha's enlightenment became the first witness to confirm it. The man who had walked away in doubt became the first to arrive at certainty. The eldest of the group, who had lived longest in confusion, became the youngest in the truth, the firstborn of the Buddha's spiritual children. The first Sangha and the full enlightenment. Over the following days, the Buddha continued teaching the 5 ascetics. One by one, they achieved stream entry. Then the Buddha taught them about non-self, about the impermanent nature of the body and mind, and one by one, they progressed through the higher stages of enlightenment until all 5 became fully liberated. Arahants, completely awakened beings, free from all suffering. Thus was formed the first Sangha, the first community of awakened disciples. The Buddha himself was the first gem. His teaching, the Dhamma, was the second gem. And these 5 men, with Kaundinya as the first among them, became the third gem, the Sangha. Kaundinya's role in the early Buddhist community was significant. He was the most senior disciple by age and by attainment. When the Buddha established the practice of seniority in the monastic order, Kaundinya naturally took his place as the eldest, the most venerable. But here is what's remarkable. Despite being the first, despite his senior status, Kaundinya never sought prominence. You don't find him in dramatic debates or miraculous displays. His name appears in the texts not because he demanded attention, but because his position was historically undeniable. He was there first. He traveled with the Buddha through the early years of teaching. He witnessed the growth of the Sangha from 5 to hundreds to thousands. He saw wealthy merchants and former kings bow before the same teaching that had first opened his eyes in the deer park. The Buddha once declared that among his disciples, Kaundinya was foremost in seniority. It wasn't a title the elders sought, it was simply a fact. And with that seniority came a quiet authority, a steadiness that helped anchor the growing community. As Kaundinya grew older, he largely withdrew from the public teaching circuit. He spent more time in meditation, deepening the peace he had found. In his final years, he lived in remote areas, content with solitude, wanting nothing more than to rest in the truth he had discovered decades earlier. When death came, he faced it with the equanimity of one who had long ago understood its nature. He passed away peacefully, fully liberated, having lived as a monk for many decades after his enlightenment. His last days were marked not by fanfare but by the profound silence of completion.
The paradox of first and last Kaunindinya's story contains a beautiful paradox that runs through all of spiritual life. He was first to understand, yet he had given up right before the teaching came. He was most senior, yet he remained in the background. He prophesied the Buddha, yet he walked away from the Buddha. He knew with certainty as a young man, yet he learned the deepest knowing as an old man. This pattern reveals something crucial about the spiritual path. It's not linear. It's not about accumulating knowledge or maintaining perfect faith. It's about remaining open to truth even after you think you've failed, even after you've walked away, even after you've given up. Kaundinya walked away from Siddhartha in the forest, but when the Buddha appeared in the deer park, Kaundinya was still available. He hadn't hardened his heart completely. He hadn't decided that he knew everything and needed to learn nothing more. That sliver of openness, that tiny crack in his certainty, was enough for the light to enter. Think about how easily he could have missed everything. If he had been practicing in a different forest, if he had been too proud to listen, if he had clung too tightly to his ascetic views, the first teaching would have fallen on different ears. Someone else would have been first. Someone else would have been Añña Kauṇḍinya. But he was there, and when the moment came, despite his skepticism, despite his disappointment, despite his wounded pride, he listened, really listened, and in that listening, he heard not just words, but the very structure of reality revealing itself. His later years of quiet practice also teach us something. After enlightenment, he didn't become a charismatic teacher or a miracle worker. He didn't write texts or gather his own following. He simply lived in peace, practiced diligently, and let his life speak for itself. There's a humility in that choice. Being first doesn't mean being best. Being senior doesn't mean being superior. Understanding the truth doesn't make you special. It makes you ordinary in the deepest sense, freed from the need to be extraordinary.
The teaching lives on Kaunindinya's enlightenment established something that continues to this day: the possibility of awakening through hearing and understanding the Dhamma. He proved that liberation wasn't reserved for the Buddha alone, that the path could be walked by ordinary humans, that the teaching itself had transformative power. Every person who has awakened since that day in the deer park stands in a lineage that begins with Kaundinya. He was the first confirmation that the Buddha's method worked, that the Dhamma was not just philosophy but practical, effective truth. The formula that unlocked his understanding: whatever has the nature of arising, has the nature of ceasing, remains one of the most powerful meditation objects in Buddhism. Millions of practitioners have used this insight as a doorway to liberation. They see the arising and passing of breath, of sensations, of thoughts, of emotions, and in seeing this clearly enough, they touch the same deathless truth that Kaundinya touched. His doubt, too, teaches us we don't have to have perfect faith. We don't have to be certain all the time. We don't have to maintain unwavering devotion. We just have to remain open enough to recognize truth when it appears, humble enough to admit when we've been wrong, and courageous enough to listen one more time. The prophecy Kaundinya made as a young Brahmin came true, but not in the way he imagined. He thought he would serve a Buddha. Instead, he became the Buddha's first spiritual heir. He thought he would witness enlightenment. Instead, he embodied it. He thought his role was to confirm someone else's awakening. Instead, his own awakening became the confirmation. What this means for us today. So what does Kaunindinya's story offer us, here, now, thousands of years and thousands of miles from that deer park? First, it teaches us about the non-linearity of spiritual growth. We imagine the path should be straightforward: set an intention, follow through, achieve the goal. But Kaunindinya's path was anything but straight. He prophesied, he forgot, he remembered, he followed, he doubted, he abandoned, he returned, he resisted, and finally he understood. The breakthrough came not because he maintained perfect faith, but because he remained available to truth despite his imperfect faith. How many times have you started a spiritual practice with enthusiasm, only to abandon it? How many times have you felt certain about something, only to doubt it later? How many times have you walked away from a teaching or a teacher, convinced they had nothing more to offer you? Kaunindinya's story says, that's normal. That's human. The question isn't whether you'll falter, you will. The question is whether you'll remain open enough to recognize truth when it appears again. Second, his story teaches us about the danger of spiritual pride masquerading as certainty. Kaundinya was so sure that extreme asceticism was the path that he couldn't recognize enlightenment when it sat before him in the deer park. His very commitment to his method became an obstacle to truth. He had to be willing to let go of his certainty to receive deeper knowledge. This is perhaps the subtlest trap on the spiritual path. We find a practice that works, a teaching that resonates, a method that produces results, and then we cling to it so tightly that we can't see beyond it. We become fundamentalists of our own experience. Someone offers us a deeper teaching, and we reject it because it doesn't match our current understanding. We would rather be consistently wrong than uncomfortably right. Third, Kaunindinya's enlightenment shows us that understanding and experiencing are different things. He had studied the Vedas for decades. He knew philosophy, ritual, cosmology, but intellectual knowledge didn't liberate him. What liberated him was direct perception, seeing for himself the arising and passing of all phenomena. The Buddha didn't give him new information. He gave him a new way of seeing the information he already had. This is crucial for modern practitioners who approach Buddhism as philosophy or psychology. You can understand the Four Noble Truths intellectually and remain completely trapped in suffering. Understanding that suffering exists doesn't end suffering. Understanding that attachment causes suffering doesn't end attachment. Only direct perception of these truths, in your immediate experience, has liberating power. Kaundiny's breakthrough came not from hearing about impermanence, but from witnessing it directly in his own mind and body. How you can practice this. So how do you cultivate the kind of openness and direct perception that led to Kaundinya's awakening? Here are specific practices you can begin today. First, practice letting go of spiritual certainty. Notice when you become convinced that your current understanding is complete. Notice when you start defending your view rather than investigating your experience. When you hear a teaching that contradicts what you believe, instead of immediately rejecting it, try this. Sit with it. Hold both your view and the new view simultaneously. Ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? What if there's something here I haven't seen yet? This doesn't mean abandoning discernment or believing everything you hear. It means maintaining the flexibility that allows truth to enter. Second, work with the formula that enlightened Kaundinya. Whatever arises, passes away. Make this a meditation practice. Sit quietly and observe your breath. Notice the in-breath arise and pass. Notice the out-breath arise and pass. Don't control it, just watch it. Then expand your awareness. Notice sensations in your body arising and passing. Notice sounds arising and passing. Notice thoughts arising and passing. Notice emotions arising and passing. The key is not to think about impermanence, but to witness it directly, moment by moment in your actual experience. Third, bring curiosity to your doubt. When you doubt your practice, your teacher, your path, don't see it as failure. See it as information. What specifically are you doubting? What evidence supports your doubt? What evidence contradicts it? Kaundiny's doubt didn't destroy his capacity for awakening. It made him listen more carefully when the teaching finally came. Your doubt, held wisely, can sharpen your discernment rather than paralyze your practice. Fourth, create conditions for direct perception. This means meditation, but it also means slowing down. Direct perception requires presence, and presence requires time and space. You cannot see the arising and passing of phenomena when you're rushing through life at maximum speed. Build moments into your day when you stop, breathe, and simply observe what's happening in your direct experience. Not what you think about it, not what it means, not where it's leading, just what it is, right now. Fifth, practice humility about your spiritual achievements. Notice when you start to feel special because of your practice, your insights, your experiences. This is natural. Ego loves to colonize even our efforts to transcend ego. But Kaundiny's example shows us that true understanding leads to ordinariness, not superiority. It leads to quiet practice, not loud proclamations. When you catch yourself becoming proud of your spiritual progress, gently return to observation. What is pride? It arises, it passes. It's just another phenomenon, not who you are. The door is still open. Kaundiny's enlightenment happened over 2,000 years ago in a deer park in India. But the door he walked through remains open. The truth he saw is still available. The method that freed him still works. You don't have to wait for a Buddha to appear. The teaching is here. The path is laid out. The only question is whether you're willing to listen, really listen with the kind of openness that allows reality to reveal itself. You might have walked away from practice 100 times. You might have doubted, failed, given up, grown cynical. Kaundinya did too. And still, when the moment came, he was present enough to hear. That presence, that availability, that tiny crack in the armor of certainty, that's all you need. The prophecy Kaundinya made wasn't just about Siddhartha becoming a Buddha. It was also, unknowingly, a prophecy about himself, that he would understand, that he would know, that he would see directly what so many only believe in or hope for. What prophecy are you living? What truth have you sensed but not yet fully grasped? What teaching have you heard but not yet embodied? What door stands before you, waiting for the moment when you're finally ready to walk through? If this story has touched you, if Kaundinya journey has illuminated something in your own path, please subscribe to Buddhist Stories and share this with someone who needs to hear it. These ancient teachings aren't just history, they're living maps to freedom. Join us as we explore the lives of the Buddha's disciples and discover the timeless wisdom that can transform your life today. Every week, we bring you these profound stories, these practical teachings, these invitations to awaken. The door is open. Will you walk through?